here you describe what's going on, the challenges you're facing, and what basically is going to happen for the next, which is the action, the A. And it's sort of like all flows together, and the A is what you did, how you did it, how you overcame it. So you want to really talk about what went through it, which is the result. And this is the R. So the R consists of what you accomplished essentially, and what you found out, what you learned, and it's basically the impact and what you accomplished. And here is where you can tie into any of the company's values and like the mission statement. So the interviewer can understand that, oh, you're making a good point, and it's definitely a culture fit, like Apoorv mentioned on the last slide.
So now we're going to redo that example, right? But this time we're going to use the STAR method, and we're going to assume that the value of the company that we want to demonstrate is going to be perseverance.
Okay. So as I mentioned, the first part of the STAR method is the S. And here's where you're going to introduce or restate the situation to the employer. And then you're going to provide a little bit more detail about what's going on. So as we mentioned before, the interviewer asked, tell me about a time you failed. And example response for this part of the STAR method, the situation would be, this question makes me recall a situation like in my freshman year where I was working on a computer science project. And so yeah, as I mentioned before, this is where you just want to lay out what's going on, so you can provide some more context on the next one, which Apoorv will mention.
Yeah, so continuing on with our STAR method, right? The next step in the STAR method is task, right? So describe the task you had to do within your situation, including the expectations and challenges. So in our example, tell me about a time you failed, right? The task response would be, our project consisted of implementing a 2-3-B tree, right? And you have to also provide some more details, right? So you'd say something like, my implementation functionality was working correctly, however, my runtime complexity was too high.
Okay, perfect. And then the third part of the STAR method is the action. And here's where you're really going to explain what you did and how you did it. So this is where you go more in depth, more in detail about the situation, the problem, and really tie it into the question. So again, same thing, time up where you failed. And example response for this part would be, I didn't really know where to go from there, so I tried rewriting a specific method. In this case, it's add value, because I thought that there was slowness in that. But however, that wasn't really the case because the runtime was consistent. So after looking through Stack Overflow, found out that user incursion was actually slowing my code. So instead implemented the push-up iteratively. So so in this part, what you're really trying to do is explain more in depth about the situation. So notice how you're describing that, oh, it wasn't like this way, but instead it was like more of this way. So just give more details for this step. Yeah.
And then finally, the last part of the STAR methodology is to end with the results, including accomplishments, reward, and impact. Right. So continuing on with our example, we would end the question with something like, as a result, I learned that when you persevere, you slowly chip away at the problem until you find the solution. Right. And this is the part where you really want to put emphasis on a company value or associate yourself with the company's mission statement so that they know that you're a good culture fit for the company. Right. This is where you're saying, this is what I learned and this is how it changed me and this is why I'm a good fit for your company.
Yeah. So persevere here is bolded because actually in the last one, or beginning of the STAR, notice how one of the company's values like perseverance. So it might not be the case, but if they do have something like that, you can always like tie it in. So, okay. Perfect. This is kind of slow. Okay, yeah. So now here's a couple of just like basic behavioral interview questions. There's like so many out there. You can just Google it. But Apoorv and I, we picked out a couple just to demonstrate like what the interviewer is really looking for. So like in the first one, if the interviewer asks, give me an example of a time where you faced a conflict, while working on a team and how you handle that. So what the company's trying to figure out is how you go upon handling conflict, first of all, and how you work on a team, because they're really looking forward to that, right? It's very common in the industry, so it's a good question to ask. Another question they might ask is how you deal with a lot of pressure and how you really went through it. And this is a good question to ask. They might ask because let's say that there's some sort of deadline for your internship or for work. They just want to see how you deal with that sort of pressure and how you can eventually come out on top at the very end. Tied into that one would be something like how you deal with stress. And this is mainly for seeing if you can get something done and how you basically function through that, right, Apoorv?
Yep, exactly. And the last two, so tell me about a time you failed. How did you deal with the situation, right? So especially for this question is pretty common in behavioral interviews, right? And when you set up this question, you should describe the situation you failed, but you should put emphasis on how you learned, right? So this is a really good question for showing a company value, such as perseverance, like in our previous example, cooperation, saying something like I went to a teammate for help, things like that. So don't get scared when you see something like tell me about a time you failed, right? You don't want to paint yourself as a perfect candidate. You want to paint yourself as a perfect candidate for that position, right? And then describe a time when you saw some problem and took the initiative to correct it. This is also really good for showing company value if it matches. And what the recruiter is really looking for, are you a go-getter? Are you somebody who will proactively look at solutions?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so for tips, these are just pretty general, but just make sure your attire is like professional. Don't like come with like a t-shirt. Obviously get some rest the day before, get like a good night's sleep. And make sure you're not hungry. I don't know, sometimes like I feel hungry during the interview, so I'm like just like get a snack before, I guess. Also, if this wasn't like during Also, if this wasn't during COVID, just be on time, like 10 to 15 minutes early if it was in person, but around the same amount if it's online, if you need to set up like something like on WebEx or Zoom or whatnot. So just be on time there. You want to make a good first impression. And obviously, right now we're not really shaking hands, but just make sure you do that when it's in person. And just like overall, just do some research on the company so you can go on their websites and just see their values, their mission statement, what they're doing right now, I guess. So things like that. Yeah,
and just some tips that we forgot to put on there. Mm-hmm. Right. Make sure you smell good. Don't go to the company interview smelling like you just came from practice or something.
Gym socks.
Make sure you take a shower and know what the company product is. What is their main source of income, right? They might ask you about why do you want to work here, right? And besides the software technical aspect, you should know what the company is doing, how they make their money, and et cetera.
Yeah, and also to add on with that, I would also say just look at the job description one more time, maybe just to see what questions you have off of that. So, okay.
Okay, so it's always good. The interviewer at the end is going to ask, do you have any questions to me? And it's always good to ask a question to express interest more than the other candidates, right? So here's a list of some questions to ask the interviewer after your interview. And so what are the next steps in the interview process? If he or she hasn't already told you, it's a go-to question of mine, and it's very good because it shows interest. It shows that you want this vision, and you also want to know what's next, right? My personal favorite is I'd love to know, how do you define success in this role, or what attributes does a successful intern typically have, right? And it shows that you want to be successful in this role and you want to impress, basically. And you can also ask about opportunities for advancement. Interviewers like to see that you're thinking about coming back to a long-term future at the firm, which means coming back for the next summer, or maybe even if you're graduating, a full-time role at their company.
Yeah, so this is just the tip of the iceberg, but there's always more out there. You can look on Indeed or something like that and see what you want to ask. But yeah, these are just good to have in your tool belt. Okay, activity time. So right now we're gonna go into the mock interviews. So we have like a company set up, and these are like some of the values and mission statements. So I'll read through this, and then like if you guys want, you guys can come through and then interview with us. So you passed the 2 technical interviews. Congrats with GraphCore Inc., a Silicon Valley-based startup pioneering new ways to sustainable energy. You now have one last interview, the behavioral one, before they're ready to offer you the job. So here's the company's mission statement, and it says GraphCore's mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, and some of the values include environmentalism, philanthropy, stronger together, and customer-centric. So with that, what we can do is divide, or let's see, if you want, you can like stay around and you can like definitely divide people up into I guess like one by one into groups, right, Apoorv? Then
So what's probably going to happen is we're going to split into some of the other voice channels, right? And you guys can come in and mock interview with us, right? Whoever is ready. So I'm going to be in Green Getaway, and Aravind is going to be in Leprechaun Limericks.
Yeah.
Right. And each interview is only going to be a couple minutes, so don't worry if you have to wait. Right. It's not going to be a full behavioral interview. It's just going to be a little bit of practice. Right. So go ahead and join us if you want to be mock interviewed.
Yeah. All right. That sounds good. I will jump out of here.